Okay, so please, can you please turn your cameras on in order to start? Okay, thank you so much. What else is there? All right, guys. So today we will be looking at question 3. We have already seen question 1 and 2 from the speaking section. And well, we still have one more. So today is question 3, and next class is going to be about question 4, the last one. Okay, so what can I say? First of all, this is an integrated task still, which means that, you got to do something, you got to read and listen and then answer. And they're going to be looking at also your comprehensional skills as well. Okay, but what else? This is also an academic task, which means that it's going to be a bit different than question 2 and 1. So you may have some new vocabulary in here. You may find some words, some complex words, if you will, but it's still going to be something that you will be able to understand. So it's not going to be rocket science or anything. So yeah. Okay, but how is the structure? How this works? So the first thing that you will do is you will read a text, something like this, an academic text. And you will be given 50 seconds to read this. And after you're done, you will listen to a lecture. So it's not going to be a conversation anymore. It's a lecture. It's an academic lecture, aka a class, a college class. And the professor will basically be just talking about the same topic in here. So it's not going to be something different or something objecting that reading or anything like that. The professor is just going to be explaining a bit more whatever you had in the reading. So it's all about the same thing. And after you're done with the lecture, then you will have the question, which is always the same, using the examples mentioned by the professor or brought by the professor, explain, and then you will have to explain the reading. So we will see how to interpret that question in a bit. But basically regarding time, you will have the same time that you had in question 2 and in all the integrated tasks for the reading, which is 30 seconds for preparing and then 60 seconds to deliver your response. So 30 and 1 minute, the same as in question 2. And that's pretty much it, regarding the technical part. So first you read for 50 seconds, you listen to the lecture, you get the question, you have 30 seconds to prepare, and then you got 60 seconds to deliver your response. So is it okay so far? Any questions? Are we all good with this? Okay. Now, regarding the topics that you may have, like if you want to be more specific, what topics can you find in this, in the task in general? So the 3 most common topics are these ones: psychology, biology, and business. And believe me, I do really think that you're just going to find one of these 3. However, there are cases in which I have seen art topics or history topics or literature, sociology, geology, art history, maybe, everything else you can think of. But believe me, mainly you will have these 3 big topics, big chances that you will have one of these. So psychology, biology, or business. If it's psychology, which lucky you is the most common one, it's also the easiest one because I would say mainly because of the vocabulary. It's all about things that you will for sure understand. So it's usually about, how our mind works, how we interact with each other, how we experience certain things, how we process certain experiences, how our memory works, how we learn. It's all about how our mind works, basically, or how we behave. Behavior is always there. If it's biology, it's usually, believe me, about animals or plants. I haven't seen a biology topic on humans, but it's basically about how they organize, how their life processes are, how they relate with one another, how they adapt. That's something very common to see, how certain animals adapt to certain things, like how seabirds find food, how birds have adapted to climate change, or how plants defend themselves against insects, those kind of things, if it's biology. And if it's business, it's usually on marketing and advertising techniques, or concepts related to that. Okay, so pretty much the topics that you can have are psychology, biology, and business. Psychology being the easiest one. So is that okay about the topics? Okay, so let's try to look at the first example that we'll be looking at today. This is the reading in here. As you can see, well, it's an article as well, but let's call it reading. So as you can see, what you have here is a title and then a text. So the first tip that I will give you guys, and it's not a tip really, it's what you have to do, is read the title and take notes on the title. So write down the topic. And why? Because this is the most important, well, not the most important, but one of the most important parts. So this is even more important than it was in question 2, because in this case, this is not a summary, or this is not like what the topic could be about. This is a concept, okay? So this is a specific key term that you need to remember and you need to mention. So it's a very key term that you need to stick to it, that you need to remember, and that you for sure need to mention in your response. So it's not something that you can change or paraphrase or summarize or avoid saying. So it's really gonna be there, okay? Now, what else? When you read, this is gonna be an explanation of the title. Okay, so this is, of course, an explanation of what the topic or the concept is, but there's just one thing that I want you to do here. There's just one thing that you need to find here, and that is the definition, okay? So out of all the words that you will find here, of all the sentences, I just want you to find 1 or 2 where you will have the definition of this concept. So basically you need to figure out what behavior modification is, okay? And it's gonna be here, I promise, somewhere in there. Now, okay, everything else, apart from the definition, I'm not saying it's not important and it's not gonna help you, but you don't have time. You won't have time to mention that stuff, okay? So you just have to leave some things behind, to be honest, and you just need to prioritize, and like make sure to mention the most relevant information. So believe me when I say just try to find what the definition is, take notes on that, like keywords and stuff, and that's it, okay? Everything else, if you have extra time, more than, if you're done with the definition and you have some extra time, then maybe you can look at the other things. But that's usually not the case. The main thing is usually the definition. So you just find that and you're done. Okay, so I think I have talked too much. Can anybody read this for me? Just to see what it's about. Maybe Kate? Do you mind reading?
Okay, teacher. Behavior modification. Individuals often modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions. When an individual learns through experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. An unpleasant consequence, on the other hand, discourages further repetition of the behavior. While behavior modification can be observed in experiments, it also occurs frequently in everyday settings when individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of the behavior.
Okay, thanks so much. So can anybody tell me what behavior modification is? What do we like what do we have here? What's the concept or what's the definition here?
I think the definition would be that behavior modification is when an individual changes its behavior based on the consequence he has learned about a behavior.
Good, that's it, perfect. So you're right. It could be, the final sentence maybe, or even, the first one also, or even, this one here, when we learn through experience. So you have a lot of them. Sometimes you will have some red flags, like this is known as behavior modification, or this is called behavior modification, or this is defined as, or behavior modification is. So sometimes it's gonna be more direct, but sometimes you're just gonna have it everywhere in the article. So just find one, maybe the shorter one, if you will, but that's it, okay? Like the details, whether we repeat the consequence if it's pleasant, or we don't repeat it if it's not pleasant, that's not important. Just find out. Now, after we have done that, then you will, listen to the lecture. So about the lecture, guys. So the lecture will pretty much be a further explanation of this, of behavior modification, but not just any explanation. To be more specific, it will be real world examples. So it's gonna be like real world applications of this concept. So when we see behavior modification in real life, in action, that's what the lecture will be about. Now, depending on the task, depending on the topic that you have, you could have either one or two examples. So for instance, if it's a psychology topic, then you will have just one example. However, if it's a biology or a business topic, then you will find two. So that's important to know as well. You will see why. So psychology, one example, biology or business, two examples. Now, if it's just one example, a psychology one, then believe me, it's one of these two things. It's gonna be a story or an experiment. So when I say a story, it could be something that the professor tells, about himself, his own experience, or it could be a story from a friend, or it could be like a more general story, a more general example about maybe how teenagers behave in certain ways, or how elderly people behave like that, or how kids, or how adults, or how people who live in certain places do this. But it's gonna be usually a story. Or it could also be an experiment. That's not very common, but I have seen some. So things like you have a group of people you're collecting some samples, something's proving another thing. So the biggest piece of advice I could give you when you have one example, which is very common to have because psychology is really common, is try to find the relationship among ideas. So try to find the sequence of events, what happens first, what happens next. And when you're giving your response, try to do it in the same chronological order. Try to look for any cause-effect relationships, like whether something's caused by another thing before and after, or, if you have any comparison of things or any contrast of ideas, try to look for those types of relationships, because that's usually where the important information goes around. So you want to get there. Now, if it's a biology or a business topic, then you will have two examples. If it's a biology one, then it will probably be two animals or two plants. So this animal here does this and does that, and this other animal here does this and does that. Or this plant here releases chemicals, and this other plant here has certain features, I don't know. Or if it's business, maybe you have two companies or two products or two techniques, two strategies, what have you. So I cannot really tell you so much how it's going to be there, but those are the things that you can expect. One example, psychology, stories or experiments. two examples, two animals, two plants, or two types of concepts in business. So is that okay so far? Okay. Now this is a psychology one, right? It's about behavior, how we behave, or behavior modification. So we're gonna read the transcript for the lecture. We're not gonna listen to it because I wanna take a look at how it's structured, the language that they use, and mainly the content. So this time we're not gonna read out. So please, you read on your own this. I'll give you like 1 minute to read maybe, and then we'll talk about it. So please read this. Okay, so are you all done reading? Okay. So what's this about? This is the transcript of a lecture, as I was saying. But what is it about? Anybody can tell me?
How kids react to in a school to the teacher about how to behave.
Good, perfect. So yeah, it's about how kids behave in the classroom at school. Good. Okay, so this is obviously, you know, the example or the lecture corresponding to this text. So it has to do with behavior modification. You know, it's about how kids modify their behavior based on what they learned about the consequences of that behavior, you know? So it's basically just how kids apply, or, you know, how this concept applies in kids. Okay, but let's get deeper into this. So were you guys able to find any cause-effect relationships in here? Are there any? So what are they?
When the kid behaves bad, they get punished, and when the kid behaves good, he gets a reward.
Perfect, that's it, you got it. So when kids misbehave, they get punished. But if they behave well, you know, if they do what they're supposed to do, where's this? Then they get rewarded. That's perfect. Okay. And any before and after, or any, you know, sequence of events, something like that here? So look at this word here, right? Soon they learn to. Okay, so that also, you know, happens in a certain order. It's not just that it's in any order. So first they misbehave, and as a result of that, they get punished, and then, you know, they learn. So, you know, it's again like cause effect as well. So then they learn that, you know, they get punished when they misbehave, And as a result of that, they start behaving well. And finally, they get rewarded and they learn about, they basically learn how to behave because of all that experience that they have gone through, because of all the consequences that they had to face for their behavior. So that's basically what the whole lecture is about. Now, in your response, guys, remember I said it's 60 seconds. You're going to have to leave some things behind. So please try to forget about the details. So when you're taking notes, just take notes on these important things like misbehave, arrow, punishment. And then 2, we could say behaving well, arrow, getting reward, because that's everything that matters really. Now the details about things like they raise their hand, they sit quietly, they pay attention, the little happy face stickers, all those details are not that important. I'm not saying that you don't have to mention them. You can, if you want, you're more than welcome to do so, but be aware that sometimes you won't have that much time. So if you see that you're good with time, then of course you can say something like they get rewarded. For instance, they may receive stickers or they may do this and that. You can tell me that. But the things that you need to make sure you do say, like the mandatory stuff, is this, And also, in your response, try to always connect the reading with the listening. You know what? Some people say that this is the hardest question for the speaking section, because this is the only one when you're explicitly being asked to connect the ideas. The question, remember I said, was using the examples from the lecture, explain behavior modification. So the question is not telling you, first explain behavior modification, the definition, and then explain the example or summarize the example. No, the question is saying, using the examples or using the lecture, explain the concept. So you need to use, do what they say. You need to use this example to illustrate or to explain this. So you gotta make connections. You gotta tell me something like, so as the passage says, kids learn through experience, and kids learn based on the behavior or the consequences of their behavior. So I'm making those connections in there. And that's really what you have to do in your response. Okay. Now, if you have a biology or a business topic, then remember I said you will have 2. So this is how a transcript from a biology topic looks like. As you can see, you have 2 paragraphs. One tip I could give you is pay attention to transitions. Like one adaptation is, another adaptation is, for example, take this as an example. So pay attention to those transitions, like first, furthermore, for instance, to illustrate, as a result, now let's look at, all those transitions are going to help you understand the structure of the lecture. And another thing, if you guys are wondering what the most important information here is, always the beginning, like the introduction to each subtopic. That's the most important information. So one adaptation is their ability to release chemicals. Another one is their complex root system. That's the most important part. If you have time and if you are able to identify some examples, then do it as well. Like redwood trees and these other trees do this. So only if like an extra thing, but the most important information, if you have to, is the beginning. Like the first part of each subtopic. That's where you have like the intro to the subtopic. Okay, guys. So any questions so far? Okay. We're gonna do one example. Like you're gonna do one and we're gonna listen to it. But before we do that, I would like to take a look at the template. So this is the template that we have. It's a pretty complete one. You can change the words, as I always say, but keep the structure, please. So in the template, look at the times here. So 15 seconds, you have to give the introduction. And then the rest of it is supposed to be for the lecture. You know what I always say for the speaking. The listening is way more important than the reading. So you gotta focus more in the listening than in the reading. And you have to structure your response in the same way. So what you can do is at the beginning, you have to give a short intro. And the intro is just what you have extracted from the reading. So in your introduction, you need to make sure that you mention the topic and the definition. So you say, according to the reading or according to the passage, behavior modification is when individuals learn through experience or when individuals change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, if you want. But basically you do that, okay? You tell me what the topic and the definition are. Okay, and that's everything that you need to do in the intro. Please don't tell me anything else from the reading. That's it, that's enough. And then you move on to the lecture. You say something like, in the lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept by providing an example of, if it's just one example, you can use this. You could say an example of kids and how they behave in school. The professor mentions that when kids are in school, first they tend to misbehave, and then as a result, they get punished. Afterwards, they learn from the consequences of their actions, and they start to behave well. Therefore, the teacher rewards them. So finally, they learn how they need to behave in school. So kids are learning through experience and learning through the consequences of their behavior. And then you can say, so that's how the professor demonstrates behavior modification. Okay, that's a sample response. It's short, it's concise. I'm not going into detail, I'm just mentioning the relevance tab. Try to make that connection. You know how at the end I said, so kids are learning through the consequences of their behavior. That's important to do. And you know how I'm using transitions? Like first, kids do this. As a result, they get punished. Afterwards, they do that. Therefore, they get rewarded. Finally, the kids do this, and so they learn. So try to use those transitions as you go. Try to make connections. You can say, as the passage mentions, when the result is pleasant, they tend to repeat it, just like it happened to, or just like happens with kids who do this and this and that. So pretty much, you know, what I'm saying here is try to connect your ideas, try to keep the structure, do a good intro, don't get into details, and yeah, you know. So, and try to also use like these reporting verbs, you know. I'm saying the professor mentions that when kids do this, the professor states that kids do that. Try to use those reporting verbs as well. Okay, so I think that's kind of it. Any questions now before we look at the real example with the audio and everything? Any questions? Okay, so I like that we have time. We have like, well, 25 minutes. So we can do even 2. That's good. Okay. Probably we can, maybe if we have time, we can do even 3, you know, 1 psychology, 1 biology, and 1 business, if we have time. Well, let's try to do this. So guys, here's the reading. You have 50 seconds to read. You know what the topic is already, comfort zone bias. Try to find out what this means. What is comfort zone bias? So 50 seconds to read. Okay. So now we will listen to the conversation. I'm sorry, to the conversation I said, to the, I mean the lecture, okay? So let's listen to the lecture.
First, my friend was
Okay.
good at this.
Were you, I think I wasn't sharing the screen sound. Was that the case? Oh, guys, oh my. I'm so sorry. I'll play it again. I thought we were listening to it. Thanks so much for making me notice. Okay. Otherwise, we would have been. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so this comes up a lot when people make career decisions. A friend of mine from college always wanted to be a film reviewer. He was a film major and he loved movies. Most of all, he loved to write about movies. So when he graduated, he looked for a job as a film reviewer for a newspaper because, as a film reviewer, he'd get to see films for free and would be paid to write about them. That's what he loved. But he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer. So he took a position as a news reporter instead for a newspaper, investigating stories, writing about events, what news reporters do. Now, at first, my friend wasn't sure he'd be any good at this. He'd never been a news reporter before. But eventually, he adjusted and gained confidence, and he got used to the job. And he realized he was actually a pretty good reporter. Anyway, here's the thing. After a few years, the film reviewer for the newspaper where he worked quit, and my friend was offered her job. This was his dream, right? His opportunity to be a film reviewer had finally come, and the new job would actually pay more, too. But did he take the job? Nope, he turned it down. He told me he'd gotten used to being a news reporter, and he just didn't want to try something else. It seemed like too big of a change since, well, there was a chance that the new job might not work out.
Using the example from the lecture, explain the comfort zone bias.
Okay, now I'll give you all 30 seconds to organize your thoughts, and then we'll try to do it. Okay, I can also do it if you want, so that we can look at an example. Let's. Okay. So, anybody wants to try to give it a shot? Can anybody do it? Okay, maybe Oshin, you there? Would you want to go first? You know what to do. It's just that you give an intro at the beginning, according to the passage. Comfort zone bias is, then you tell me the definition, a short one. And then you say in the lecture, the professor illustrates this with the example of, and I can even say that for you, it's like a friend of his, right? And with example of his friend, who, I don't know what happened there. So that's pretty much it, guys. So Okay, if not Ashin, anybody else? Anybody wants to try?
Can I try?
Yes.
Okay. Who was that?
I think someone else was talking, but I said if I can try.
Okay. So is that Melissa? You just said that? I cannot.
Yeah, me,
Yeah?
Melissa.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. So yes, of course. Then we have time. You can also do it with the other person. So go ahead now.
Okay. According to the reading passage, comfort zone bias is when someone is in their comfort zone and avoids taking risks. In the lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept by providing the example of his friend. She always wanted a job of being a review movies, but she didn't find that job. So she began being a reporter, and she gained a lot of confidence in this area. She became a good reporter, and there was a opportunity to be a film reviewer in that job, but she doesn't accept this job because she wants try something new. So that's how, by using this example, the professor demonstrate the comfort zone bias.
Okay. Perfect. Nice, Melissa. I think that was just great. You made it on time. Only the conclusion was missing, but the conclusion is not necessary. And that's it's like completely optional. And if you want to make it shorter, we can say, so that's how the professor illustrates comfort zone bias, because this is a bit long, I gotta admit. Okay. So perfect. I really like the way you chase the point. You weren't really, telling me the whole story because it was long, like 3 minutes maybe. But you were avoiding those details about whether someone quit or whether like that stuff that's not really important. And you got to them like the most important part, which is how I'm not sure though if it was a she. I think it was a he. Careful with that. But how the friend turned down his dream job because he was in his comfort zone bias. Maybe what I would add to your response is some transitions, like to tell stories. So to say like, and he did this, and. So afterwards, subsequently, consequently, or then, or I don't know, or first, second, just those maybe. And it will really be perfect. Like timing and everything was good. So well done, Melissa.
Yay, thank you, Miss.
Okay. Okay, now who was the other person? Who else wants to go? Someone else was wanting to go. Nobody really?
I can try.
Okay, thanks so much, Karina. So go ahead.
As the passage mentions, the comfort zone bias is when people make decisions, they rather stick to what they know instead of taking risks. The professor illustrates this concept by giving the example of a friend who studied for being a film reviewer, and in some point of his life he got the opportunity to make his dream job, but he turned down this opportunity because he was afraid of trying and he got used to his current job. So this is the way that the professor explained the concept of comfort zone bias.
Okay, perfect, Karina. So I think you guys are really good with this. I love the way that, again, you focused on the important part, so he got the chance to work at his dream job, but he turned it down because he was afraid of taking risks. He was afraid of doing something new. And you could also add something like he was afraid of taking risks because he was experiencing the comfort zone bias. That's a really nice thing when you have psychology, he was experiencing blah, 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 or he was doing this. And then you just place whatever it is, the concept that you have in there. And that's good. So you really got the idea of what the definition was, what the important part was for the example. So perfect, well done. And also I wanted to say this, the tenses, I think that's one of the struggles in this task, because usually when you have examples in the past, some people tend to make some grammar mistakes in there. You didn't, Karina. And even if you do, if you mix them with the simple present, it's going to be fine. Not everything really has to do in the past. In this case, when you have stories, so he gets the job, he doesn't want to stay out, he doesn't want to leave his comfort zone, so he turns it down. Or I can say, so he got the job, he got the chance, and he didn't want to do that. So it wouldn't really count as a big of a mistake. So it's okay if you mix the tenses. What else was I gonna say? And yeah, so nice. I think you both did well. So okay, any questions? You guys want to do one business one before we leave to see how it works? 2 examples. Okay, let's do a business one. Okay. So you will see that sometimes it's not 2 examples, but you have 1 example and 2 parts of the example, or 2 sides of the example. You will see that now. But it's always 2 if you have business or biology. So let me see where it is. Okay, guys, so here's the reading, 50 seconds to read. Okay, so your 50 seconds are up. Let's now listen to the lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a marketing class.
Nowadays, something you notice more and more is television commercials that are made specifically for certain television programs. So, let's say a company wants to sell a telephone, a cell phone. Now, during TV shows that young people watch, shows with pop music or teen serials, they create a commercial that emphasizes how fun the phone is. The phone has bright colors, and they show kids having a good time with their friends. And, well, the company wants the kids watching TV at this time to want to buy this phone that's made especially for them. But the same company will make a different commercial to be shown during, say, a program about business or a business news show. Now, for this group of people, business people, the company will have to show how efficient their phone is, how it can handle all business easily, and maybe even save money. And here's the thing. It's basically the same phone. The company has just made two different commercials to appeal to different groups of people.
Using the professor's examples, explain the advertising technique of target marketing.
Okay, advertising technique. You kind of have the definition in there, you know, in the question. Always read the question, by the way. Okay, so 30 seconds to prepare. Okay. All right, guys. So who wants to go now?
Teacher, can I try?
Yes, of course. So Paula and David also raised their hand. So after Paula, you're gonna go. Okay. So you can go ahead, Paula.
According to the reading passage, they said that advertising to a smaller audience is better than advertising to a lot of people. And also in the listening, the professor illustrates that the same company can make different types of commercial based on different groups of people. But at the end, no matter who is watching, they are going to see a different kind of commercial, but they are going also to see the same product. And that's how the professor illustrates.
Creo que se trabó.
¿La teacher?
Sí.
Uy, igual está mal.
¿Qué tal? Con sus vidas.
¿Esta parte del TOEFL es la más difícil? ¿O te tocaron así preguntas?
¿Cómo fue? Pues depende de tus habilidades. Si sos una persona que suele hablar mucho, no creo que te cueste. En mi opinión, sí, es la más difícil.
I'm terribly sorry, guys, for that. My connection was not so good, but I got to hear some of your response, Paula. I honestly, I didn't hear everything, but I got to hear some parts. So what I can tell you is, okay, maybe try to be careful with the structure, because I noticed that at the beginning you gave your definition, which was good, targeting to small audiences rather than large audiences. Now your transition, maybe try to be careful with that. Instead of saying, and also the listening explains that one company can do that, don't forget to do that transition, like a big one. The professor in the lecture illustrates target marketing with the example of a company wanting to sell a phone. So, and then okay, so here's the thing, I forgot to say this, but if you have two examples, then try to add transitions like first. He explains that if he wants to sell to a young audience, I think, or it was a young audience first. Yeah, I don't know. To a young audience, then the company will do this. Furthermore, he mentions that on the other hand, if he wants to sell to an older audience, then he will do that. So basically, just try not to forget the structure, like using the right transitions. Here's a tip. Instead of saying reading and listening, try to say passage and lecture. Okay, that's really gonna make your vocabulary better. And yeah, the good thing is that we don't have like personal examples, so we don't have to worry so much about making grammar mistakes with the tenses, you know? So that's also a pro. So is that okay? Any questions? I think David also is gonna go. Okay. So David, you can go ahead now.
According to the reading, target marketing is the strategy of reducing advertisement to the audience most interested or needed for the specific item. In the lecture, the professor illustrates this with the following example. If a company is trying to sell a cell phone to young people, they will show colors or music in their advertisement in order to show how fun the phone is. On the other hand, if they are trying to sell the same cell phone to adults or business people, they will try to show how efficient is the cell phone for business or to save time or money. And this is how the professor illustrates target marketing.
Okay, perfect, David. I think that was just perfect. So nice response. I love the timing, the structure that you were using. The professor illustrates this with the example of a company. So and then you say, if the company wants to say this, on the other hand, a good transition to use in this case, because it's like contrasting information. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything. What I could give you, one tip for everyone is vocabulary, word choice in this case, especially with business. So there are some business words that are gonna level up your response. So for instance, David was saying, it's the strategy of, or like business people. So, but there are other words, instead of saying item, for instance, you could say product, or instead of saying people, you could say audience, or the target audience. So those words like that are really helpful, when you have these business topics. So I would love to hear some words like that. So yeah, you can always review that vocabulary. It's never, it's always an option. But perfect, nice response. Okay, guys. Anybody else wants to go? Wants to do it before we leave? Would like to try? Somebody who hasn't done it? Okay. And are there any questions or any comments or anything you guys want to say? All right. So tomorrow you will be practicing, and I'm sure that's going to help as well. Make sure that, you already know what to do. I think you did that just fine. And if you haven't done it, be in tomorrow's class, because practicing is, the best way, the only way to really get through it. So make sure to be in tomorrow's class, practice, and yeah. Okay. Now, before you guys leave, I just started the survey. So please fill that out, answer those 3 questions before you leave. Okay, guys. So thanks so much. I'll see you next class.
Thank you. Bye.
Teacher.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take care.